Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War Online commentary. In this particular battle, I will be piloting the Dwarves led by the Slayer King, Ungrim Ironfist, and I'm going to be facing off against an Empire opponent. So I actually got a little bit of a treat for you guys today. I actually brought a group of IRONDRAKES with the Trollhammer torpedoes, and they actually did pretty well this battle, so it'll definitely be fun to show you guys how they did. So as far as my army composition goes, I have a front line of Longbeards. Again, these are a great unit against the Empires. Not only do they have charge resistance against large foes, which includes Demogryph Knights and other powerful Empire units, but they are also armored and shielded. So against Empire missile fire, they're going to be quite good. So I have 4 of those in the front line. In the secondary line, I have a group of Quarrelers. I accidentally got the Great Weapon. I think I actually intended to get just the regular Quarrelers and save a little bit of money, but regardless, at the end of the day, I mean, they do have that armor piercing, and the Empire is a fairly, armored faction, so if they're landing like, a flying unit, one of their lords on your Quarrelers, at least they have that armor piercing, so definitely not a complete waste in that regard. I have IRONDRAKES with Trollhammer torpedoes, so you don't see these guys often, but they do have pretty high missile damage, and they do have anti-large. So again, they can actually burn down units real quick if left unopposed. And also something else to consider, they do have 120 armor and 100 plus leadership, so they're very hard to crack, and they'll usually stay in there the whole fight. As far as leadership goes, I have a Thane with potions. I have a Runesmith with all of the upgrades. Again, with the Dwarvish army, you always have to get a Runesmith. Always. I will always reinforce that. And you can see it buffs the leadership, it buffs the attack of all my surrounding troops as they get hit by this missile fire here. In the back, I have a group of Hammers. I feel like I've been experimenting with different comps, and sometimes I would bring 2 groups of Slayers instead of Hammers, but I feel like the Hammers are so good at punching through the Empire line, and they have armor piercing, they do heavy damage, it's really good at cracking defensive armored formations. In the back, of course, Ungrim, and then a group of Slayers. I always like to have one just for mobility purposes, and again, they are good at taking down monstrous units, so if you can tie up a cavalry unit with some Longbeards and then follow up with Slayers, it's usually a pretty good investment for you, at least from my experience. So, as far as my opponent's army composition goes, he has some Halberdiers. They are armor piercing, so against the Dwarves, that is not bad. And they do have charge defense, which isn't as pertinent, but regardless, the armor piercing isn't terrible. He has a front line of Swordsmen who will, hopefully for him, absorb my missile fire. Although, to be honest, I usually don't bring more than a Quarreler or, maybe some Thunderers. But regardless, they would be pretty good against those type of units. He does have a Hellstorm rocket battery here, which is anti-infantry. It's definitely teeing off my army a little bit, but to be honest, the Dwarves are a very sturdy faction, and if anyone can endure that Hellstorm rocket fire, it will be them. Then additional swordsmen over here and halberdiers on the outside flank, and then in the back he has crossbowmen. Personally, I think the handgunners might be a little better just because of the armor-piercing nature of their attacks, but regardless, the crossbowmen are not bad. Then he also has a steam tank, so this guy is armor-piercing, and this will probably generate some decent value if he's shooting at like my hammers or other targets like that. So as far as his leadership goes, he does have a general of the Empire sitting up here on his beast, and I think that's it for his army. No, actually, I was wrong. He has 2 groups of Outriders who did a serious Vanguard deployment. Like, I'm talking all the way in the boons. So they'll be coming up here on my flank. So without further ado, let's get started. So right now, both of our armies are kind of moving. It looks like actually I'm just the only one moving. So again, as the Dwarves, I don't really like to bring artillery, especially against Empire. It's just, not only are there artillery superiors, and they can usually win that trade, but to be honest, if they can force you to have to move out of your shell and you've invested in artillery, then at that point, they're just going to ride around and flank you with cavalry. Though in this situation, he didn't bring cavalry, but more often than not, they'll have like some, Reichsguard or Empire Knights or something, and they can just really trash can your cavalry. And the only way to protect them is to leave troops back there, and then those troops aren't in the front line. So it's kind of like, yeah, at the end of the day, I usually just get a relatively quote-unquote mobile dwarf army, one that can march up and fight with the opponent and go fisticuffs. So right now I'm just moving up, and again, this steam tank is going to be a prime target for these IRONDRAKES. These guys will absolutely demolish the steam tank, and I don't think my opponent really noticed. They're kind of like mixed in there, and it's not something you see often, so a lot of people don't know how truly effective IRONDRAKES can be against these type of units, although it's also rare that the Empire brings a steam tank. So I don't know whether or not it's worth it at the end of the day to bring, IRONDRAKES, but it can be pretty fun, and at times it can certainly pay off. So I'm taking some Hellstorm rocket battery fire here. It's doing a decent amount of damage to my Longbeards in the front line, and then the steam tank has also taken some shots over here, and now I'm starting to take that missile fire. And this is where the Longbeards are just great, because they're going to absorb that missile fire very well while taking minimal losses. Unfortunately for me, that steam tank fire is doing quite good and is really punching through that line. But, you know, the missile from the Hellstorm rocket batteries, it's not going to be, you know, that bad for me. So I do pull the Slayers back. I saw some funny business going on over here, and this is not ideal. Actually, you don't want the Slayers to take fire from these guys because, again, Slayers are not armored, but, you know, I didn't really have any other great targets for them, so I just kept them back here. So the front line, we're engaging, you know, across the board, and things are, you know, going pretty well for me. And thankfully right now I'm able to get these Irondrakes right in the sweet spot right here where they have a good angle on all of his backline troops. And they're going to start shooting at this steam tank here in just a moment. And also right here I'm sending in these hammers to really crack the swordsman line. And the hammers with these longbeards as well as the runesmith is just going to absolutely destroy him. So you can see those Irondrakes got a nice volley, and look at the damage they did. That's really good. Steam tanks are one of those units that are just so annoying and so hard to kill. So anytime you can like be this cost effective against them and just take them out, and you guys will see in the next volley here when he goes ahead and takes a shot that it's going to do huge damage to this guy. And here's the next volley here, and you guys will see. And look at the damage on that. It's already at half life, so just something to consider, guys. I mean, the Irondrakes, if you can position them and protect them, they're really not terrible against large, you know, units like this. So regardless, he's circling me with Outriders, but thankfully Quarrelers are going to be really good against them. And I kind of kept the Slayers nearby to protect them, but, you know, at that point I kind of felt like they didn't need to be there because he was just doing laps. So in the front line here, I got my hammers, I got my runesmith, and a bunch of other troops, and it's going pretty well for me. This is definitely an ideal engagement. And I do pull the Slayers to surround his General of the Empire. He is considered a large unit, so the Slayers will do quite a bit of damage. You can see his health is immediately starting to get chunked. Fortunately for me, I am getting shot in the back here, but again, these Longbeards are very resilient, and they will be able to take that fire. While at the same time, these Quarrelers are also shooting over here at these Outriders, and I'm getting a great trade out of that, I would say. So over here, the Irondrakes, they actually destroyed the steam tank. Maybe 3 or 4 volleys, and they really put that thing down. So the western flank is kind of just a stalemate, but again, I focused most of my power on that center with the hammers, and then Ungram, of course, is just an absolute beast. When he gets into that center line, wherever you put him, he'll essentially put a dent in it. I don't care what he's fighting. So I had him and the Runesmith and the Thane pushing through with the hammers, and that's something that's really cool about the Dwarfs. You can kind of secure the outer flanks with Longbeards and then just crack the center, and it kind of splits and divides the enemy army. But one of the things is he invested so much in that steam tank, and I just brought a natural counter with these Irondrakes who did very well, and then they were also shooting at his general and doing pretty good damage. So the general took serious damage from the Irondrakes, and at this point the Quarrelers are also just doing amazing work against these Outriders over here. So again, you always want to bring at least, you know, one group of Quarrelers against Empire. They're pretty good at dealing with most of the range threats. So, you know, my center flank, after cracking the middle, was able to collapse over here on the right. And you can see now that Ungram's over here, most of these troops are just routing off. His General of the Empire is shaken, but he's pretty much done for at this point. So at this point, you know, most of his troops are going to get chased down by Slayers, and my hammers are going to get in there and just really, really lay the beat down on these guys with their extremely high combat stats. Again, hammers, if you look at their stats here, they have 50 weapon strength, 44 melee attack. They're very heavily armored as well. So what's cool is most damage dealer units, like Forsaken and, you know, those type of things, aren't, you know, the sturdiest units, but hammers are very, very sturdy, you know, especially for a shock combat infantry. So it was definitely a good game, and I always like, you know, the opportunity to get to use like eccentric units like these Irondrakes. You never see them, and they were actually really good. I mean, they literally demolished that steam tank and shut it down. Something my opponent probably should have done is run it back and, you know, because again, the Irondrakes don't have equivocal range to the steam tank. So if he had been able to run it back and, you know, skirmish a little better with it, but again, a lot of people do not expect the Irondrakes. It was definitely a surprise for my opponent, and it was a lot of fun at the end of the day. So most of my troops did really good. The Longbeards held the line. Of course, with the Runesmith and the Thane supporting them, they're going to be a very resilient melee force. And Ungram, you can't ask for more of a boss in the front line. So just my 2 cents there. And of course, the hammers did a good job hammering through his front line, and they paid their dues. So again, good game to Goat Boy. It was a lot of fun. A lot of units that you don't normally see in this matchup, like Hellstorm rocket batteries and Irondrakes, and then steam tanks, of course. But it was definitely a good game. So thanks again, guys, for all your support. I really appreciate it. And more content coming soon. I had a lot of good dwarf games this past week, so you guys are in for more. Thanks again.